We need to talk. 7 words. That's all it took to cut through Emily Carter like a scalpel through soft skin. She hadn't even sat down yet. The cafe was warm and buzzing with quiet conversation, soft jazz notes dancing in the air, the clink of cups and cutlery surrounding her. She was walking toward their usual table, already smiling, thinking maybe Jason had a surprise. He did, but not the kind she imagined. There he was, sitting with his arms crossed, a cappuccino untouched before him. And that's when he said it. Cold, flat, rehearsed. We need to talk. Emily froze mid-step, but she sat down anyway, clutching the strap of her bag like a lifeline. Is this about the caterer? She asked, trying to keep her voice light, her face calm. Jason didn't answer. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box, not to give it to her, to take something back. I can't marry you, Emily. The air was punched from her lungs. Her fingers trembled. What? Jason leaned back in his chair, suddenly lighter. Like breaking her heart was some kind of relief for him. It's not you, he said. We're just heading in different directions. I've made other connections, important ones. A pause. Megan Langley and I are aligned. That name, Megan Langley, the daughter of Gregory Langley, the same Gregory Langley who practically owned half of Silicon Valley's startups. Her stomach dropped. You're leaving me for her? Jason didn't flinch. It's not like that. But it was. You deserve someone simpler. That sentence cracked something inside her. She didn't cry. Not yet. She simply reached across the table, slid the ring off her finger, and placed it back in the box. Thank you for your honesty, she whispered. Then she stood, walked out, straight past the couples holding hands, past the barista who had written Mrs. Miller on her last coffee cup. Only when she turned the corner onto Elm Street did the tears finally come. But even then, she didn't scream. She didn't turn around. She just kept walking. The apartment was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that wraps around your throat like a glove and squeezes. Emily opened the door with her spare key. Jason was gone. No shoes at the door, no coat on the hook, no half-drunk energy drink on the counter like usual. But that wasn't what stopped her. It was the 6 suitcases lined up by the wall, each one labeled, her name, a list of contents, clothes, books, toiletries, like someone had packed her up not to move her, but to return her, like a rejected Amazon package. She knelt down, unzipping the nearest one, her favorite scarf, folded, her shampoo, sealed in a bag, even the framed photo of her and her foster mom carefully wrapped in bubble wrap. Jason didn't do this. He never remembered to put the cap back on the toothpaste. He didn't know how to roll clothes without wrinkling them. His mother. Emily didn't cry. She sat down, her back against the wall, her legs pulled up to her chest. The ticking of the wall clock was deafening. She had no lease. Her studio apartment was gone. She'd subleased it to a nursing student right after the engagement. She had no home. Her bank account, $96. The wedding had drained everything. Emily Carter, 28 years old, nurse bride-to-be, now unemployed, homeless, humiliated. And worst of all, discarded without a word. No note, no goodbye, just labels, like she was a storage problem that needed solving. She closed her eyes and let the silence swallow her. There was no one to call, not really, except there was one number she hadn't dialed in over a year. Margaret Temple, her foster mom. Her hand shook as she reached for her phone. Emily stared at her phone for a long time. Not because she didn't know what to do, but because she knew exactly what pressing that button meant. It meant failure. It meant returning to someone who had already saved her once. She had promised herself she wouldn't go back, that she'd stand on her own. But now she had no job, no apartment, no dignity. Just a $96 bank balance and a pile of neatly labeled baggage. She took a deep breath, opened her contacts, scrolled to the name she hadn't touched in over a year, Margaret Temple. She hit call. 1 ring, 2. Margaret Temple, came the voice, still calm, still sturdy, like an oak tree. Emily opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then a single sob escaped. Just one. "It's okay, honey." Margaret's voice shifted, instantly softening. "Where are you? Are you safe?" Emily couldn't answer. She just broke. "I was just thinking about those shoes we looked at last week," Margaret continued gently. "You know, the ones with the tiny gold buckle? I think they're still on sale." She wasn't filling silence. She was giving Emily something to hold on to. "Come home, sweetheart," she said. "I've got peppermint tea and that ratty old quilt you used to hate but always stole anyway. And the couch still dips in the middle just like you remember." Emily covered her mouth to keep from sobbing too loud. "You stay as long as you need," Margaret added. "You hear me? No explanations, no guilt. Just get here." Emily whispered, "Okay." One word. One anchor in a storm of everything falling apart. An hour later, Emily was curled up on that very couch, her head in Margaret's lap, a warm mug in her hands, and a tear-soaked blanket across her legs. And for the first time in days, she let someone hold the weight with her. The moment the cab turned up the final stretch of road, Emily knew this wasn't a house. It was a fortress, cut into the cliffs of Cypress Hill like it had been carved out of the mountain itself. All steel, glass, and sharp lines. Nothing about it said home. It said, "You don't belong here." The gate opened without a sound. As they drove through, the sky turned heavy gray clouds rolling above the endless redwoods. It felt like the edge of the world. And maybe that's why Ryan Hale chose it, to vanish. Emily stepped out, duffel bag in hand, coat collar tight around her throat. The wind was colder here, sharper. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman in a navy blue suit stood waiting, thin as wire, silver hair pulled into a severe twist. Her voice was crisp, efficient. "You're early." "I didn't want to be late." "Follow me." Margaret Temple. Not her foster mom, a different Margaret Temple. Estate manager, gatekeeper, sentinel. She led Emily through a maze of glass corridors and stone walls. No photos, no family warmth, just sleek furniture, expensive silence, and light that poured in but never softened anything. The house was beautiful in the same way a museum is beautiful. Cold, detached, untouchable. "You'll be living on the 2nd floor," Margaret said, "adjacent to Mr. Hale's private suite. He does not tolerate intrusion. Meals are provided. Communication is kept minimal unless initiated by him." "Understood," Emily nodded. She hadn't even seen the man yet, but already she could feel his presence in every polished surface, every breathless corner of the house. Ryan Hale didn't need to speak to be known. He was the kind of man whose silence echoed. The hallway outside his suite was silent, the kind of silence that feels deliberate, like the house itself was warning her, "Don't knock too loud, don't breathe too deep." Emily stood there with the manila folder in her hands, her heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Beside her, Margaret gave one final look, not warm, not cold, just watchful. "You're sure you want this?" Emily nodded. "I signed the contract." Margaret didn't blink. "That's not what I asked." Before Emily could respond, Margaret knocked twice, then opened the door without waiting. The room was huge, vaulted ceilings, glass walls, a panoramic view of endless forest and sky. It felt like a throne room built for someone who no longer believed in power. And there he was by the window, facing away in a sleek black wheelchair. Ryan Hale. She knew the name, of course. Tech mogul, multi-billionaire. The kind of man who was written about but rarely seen. "Mr. Hale," Margaret said crisply, "your new nurse has arrived. Emily Carter." He didn't turn. Not immediately. just sat there, fingers tapping slowly on the armrest. Then he pivoted and looked at her, not like a man meeting a stranger, not even like a man meeting an employee, but like someone staring down a disappointment he didn't order but still got delivered anyway. "So," he said dryly, "they sent me another one." Emily opened her mouth. "What's the bet this time, Margaret?" Ryan continued. "A week? 10 days?" Margaret didn't reply. She simply nodded once to Emily and left the door clicking softly behind her. Emily and Ryan were alone. Silence. The kind that weighed more than words. She took a breath. "I'm not here to place bets," she said evenly. "I'm here to do my job." Ryan rolled a few feet closer, scanning her like she was a low-grade investment pitch. "And what job do you think that is?" "Medication, physical therapy, monitoring vitals, supporting rehab." He snorted. "You forgot the part where you nod and smile while I fail to walk again. That's usually everyone's favorite." Emily didn't blink. "I'm not here to pity you." For a second, Ryan stilled. A pause, brief but telling. Then a ghost of a smirk touched the edge of his mouth. "That's new." He turned back toward the window, and just like that, the meeting was over. No handshake, no welcome, just a test. One she wasn't sure she passed, but she was still standing. Emily didn't expect warmth, but she also didn't expect a rulebook disguised as silence. That evening, after dinner was delivered to her room on a tray, no conversation, Margaret slid a folder under her door. A single sheet inside. No signature required, no welcome note. Just rules. Terms of care effective immediately. 24/7 availability. 2 days off per month pre-approved. No visitors. No personal phone calls from patient's wing. Speak only when spoken to in patient's presence. No questions about the accident unless invited. Emily read it twice, then a third time. Not because she didn't understand, but because it sounded less like a job and more like parole. No connection, no curiosity, no compassion, just containment. And the man behind the rules wasn't a patient, he was the warden. Later that night, Emily heard the soft hum of wheels outside her door. She didn't open it, but she knew. Ryan was making his rounds. Not to check the house, not for safety, but to make sure his walls still held. And maybe to see if the girl behind the door would break sooner than the last one. The wind had been howling since midnight. Emily couldn't sleep. The glass walls of the estate moaned softly with each gust, like the house itself was breathing, or warning. She got up to close the blinds. That's when she saw it. A light in the West Wing gym, the one place Ryan had explicitly told her never to enter. Off limits, he'd said, always. But there it was, bright, glowing, cutting through the dark like an exposed nerve. For a moment, she told herself to ignore it. Maybe he left the light on by accident. Maybe it didn't matter. But her gut said otherwise. Something about the sharpness of that light felt intentional, urgent. She slipped on a sweater, padded down the hallway on bare feet. The house was dead quiet, only her own heartbeat to keep her company. She reached the gym door. It was slightly ajar. Emily paused, listened. Nothing. Then slowly she pushed it open an inch, just enough to see. And what she saw stole the air from her lungs. Ryan Hale was standing. Not fully, not easily, but upright. Gripping a pair of parallel bars with both hands, his arms trembling, sweat pouring down his face, knees quivering beneath him, but still standing. One foot moved forward, then the other, painfully, deliberately, step by step. Emily's breath caught. She wasn't supposed to see this. But she couldn't look away. And then the door creaked. Ryan turned. And the moment his eyes locked on hers, everything changed. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ryan's voice cracked through the silence like a whip. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding, every instinct telling her to run. But she didn't. "I saw the light," she said quietly. I thought something was wrong. Ryan's hands tightened on the bars. His knuckles went white. You weren't supposed to see this. I know. Then leave. She didn't move. Not because she was defying him, not because she wanted to stay, but because what she just witnessed changed everything. He wasn't helpless. He was pretending, hiding the truth. And that raised one question louder than all the others. Why? Why are you hiding this? Emily asked. Ryan turned his face away. Sweat dripped from his brow, but his jaw stayed locked. Because the moment people see progress, he said bitterly, they start expecting miracles. Silence. He stared ahead, jaw clenched. And when the miracle doesn't come, they walk. They always walk. Emily stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. So you'd rather let everyone believe you've given up? Ryan's voice dropped. No expectations, no pressure, no disappointment, just silence. That's not silence, she said gently. That's surrender. He looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time. There was no venom in his gaze now, just exhaustion and pain. Don't tell anyone, he said. I won't. Not even Margaret. I said I won't. Ryan breathed in through his nose, then nodded once. We keep this between us. Okay. I say stop, we stop. I say go, you help. Nothing else. Understood. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ryan added, barely above a whisper, most of them crack by day 3. Emily held his gaze. Then maybe I'm not like most of them. It wasn't a friendship. It wasn't a breakthrough. It was a deal born in the silence between two people too tired to fake anything anymore. After Ryan lowered himself back into his chair, he didn't speak for a long time. Neither did Emily. The gym was quiet, except for the steady hum of fluorescent lights and the faint tremble in Ryan's arms. Finally, he said, "This stays between us. I already said yes. You don't ask. You don't offer advice unless I ask. No pity, no cheerleading. You follow my lead." Emily nodded. And in return, Ryan looked at her almost curious. You get to keep your job. Her lips twitched, a trace of a smile, not joy, not sarcasm, just acknowledgement. Fair enough. The deal was simple, but something in the room had shifted. Not warmth, not trust, but maybe the beginning of both. That night, Emily didn't report anything to Margaret. She didn't write notes. Didn't whisper to the house staff. She just went back to her room, closed the door, and for the first time since stepping into this cold glass fortress, she didn't feel entirely alone. Somewhere behind a different door, another person had decided just for a moment to let her in. The leather couch in the west sitting room had never looked inviting, but this morning it looked occupied by a man who didn't need an introduction to feel invasive. Eric Thorne, late 40s, designer shoes. Watch that cost more than Emily made in a year. He sat casually, legs crossed, drink in hand, despite it being barely 10 a.m. "Ryan," he called out with a grin, "you look like hell." Ryan rolled in from the hallway slower than usual. His face gave nothing away. "Good to see you too, Eric." The tension wasn't loud, but it filled the room like fog. Emily entered quietly with the morning tea tray. She could feel Eric's eyes land on her slowly, deliberately. Not curious, not respectful. "Calculating? This the new one?" he asked, tilting his head. "Emily Carter," she replied, before Ryan could answer, setting the tray down with steady hands. "Any better than the last 3? Eric smirked, sipping his drink. "She's not here for your amusement," Ryan said coldly. "She's my nurse." Emily gave a small, polite nod and stepped back, doing her best to disappear. But Eric's presence lingered like cologne that clung too long. The conversation turned business, mergers, contracts. She caught phrases, board tension, Langley Capital, acquisition windows. She kept her face neutral, but her pulse quickened. Langley, that name again. She didn't know what it meant yet, but her gut knew one thing clearly. Eric wasn't just a visitor. He was a storm, and the eye of it was aimed right at Ryan. Langley Capital will be ready to move by the end of Q3. Eric's voice was smooth, like velvet lined with razors. But the name? Langley. Emily felt her stomach twist. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in months, but the sound of it still made her skin crawl. Megan Langley, the woman Jason left her for. The name on the engagement announcement she found online 2 weeks after the breakup, alongside a glossy photo of Jason in a tux and Megan in white. The daughter of Gregory Langley, the name behind the empire. And now that name was echoing in this cold, sterile house like it never left her at all. Eric kept talking about venture capital shell companies' influence on the board. Emily stood silently in the corner, pretending to check tea temperature, but her ears were on fire. Why was Langley Capital involved with Ryan? Why was Megan's family showing up here now? Coincidence? Or something darker? Her pulse quickened, her mind raced. And then something clicked. Jason's sudden shift, the way her life was dismantled so quickly, so cleanly. Was this all connected? Was she sent here not by accident, but as part of someone else's plan? Emily sat alone in the east balcony, the night air biting but clear. In her hand was a file folder, the same one she found abandoned near the laundry room. It had her name on it, not handwritten, typed. Inside her resume, license, reference letters, and a background check. Too thorough, more than any normal employer would ask for. Why was it here? Why not shredded? She remembered Margaret's voice on the phone, the way the job was offered so fast. No interview, no official paperwork. Just, he needs someone now. He's picky, but you're perfect. How did Margaret even hear about the job? Her gut twisted again. What if she didn't find the job? What if the job found her? Ryan had every reason to suspect everyone. He kept his world locked down. Yet somehow, she, Emily Carter, slipped through. She thought it was because she got lucky, but maybe luck had nothing to do with it. Maybe someone wanted her here, not to help Ryan, but to distract him. Emily looked back at the folder in her lap. It suddenly felt like evidence, not of who she was, but of how carefully someone planned for her to arrive. "You need to know something," Emily said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Ryan didn't look up from his screen. "Let me guess, you're quitting." She shook her head. "No, I'm staying, because I think you're in danger." That got his attention. He turned, slowly, skeptically. "From what? Your tea wasn't hot enough?" Emily reached into her sweater and pulled out the folder, the one she found near the laundry chute. She dropped it on the table in front of him. "That's not mine," he said. "No," Emily said quietly, "but it's about me." Ryan opened it, flipped through, silence. "This level of surveillance isn't standard," he muttered. "And Langley Capital is circling," Emily added. "Eric mentioned them, casually, like they're not the same people who took everything from you." Ryan's hand clenched on the edge of his chair. "I think I was sent here for a reason," she continued. "Not by you, by them." Ryan stared at the papers. His eyes darted, calculating. "Give me an hour," he said. She nodded and left the room. 43 minutes later, he wheeled himself to her room and knocked once. "You were right," Ryan said, his voice quiet but sharp. "The call logs, the emails, there's a pattern, and we're both in it. The library lights never used to stay on past 9 p.m. Now they burned past midnight." Emily sat across from Ryan at the long oak table, both surrounded by stacks of folders, legal documents, and blueprints. No lawyers, no assistants, just them. "They want you to look weak," Emily said, flipping through a shareholder agreement, "so they can break the board vote without resistance." Ryan nodded, eyes scanning lines of financial transfers. Eric's been bleeding the IP division, diverting funds to a shell company. Quiet, but steady. Emily looked at him. Can we prove it? Not yet, he replied, but we can corner him. She pushed a printed email toward him. And this, Ryan's eyes narrowed, that is from my private server. Silence stretched between them. Someone inside was leaking. They're watching everything, Emily whispered. Even this conversation might be compromised. Ryan leaned closer. Then we stop playing defense. He pulled out a blank notepad, drew 3 boxes, labeled them Eric, Megan, board. We isolate, we divide, we expose. Emily smiled for the first time in days, not because she had the upper hand, but because, for the first time, Ryan wasn't waiting to recover. He was ready to fight. The sound of a closet door creaking open at 6:43 a.m. That's how Emily knew something had changed. Ryan never opened that closet. She peeked around the corner and froze. He was buttoning a suit, dark navy, crisp, impeccable. A cane leaned against the wall not for weakness, but for statement. Big day? She asked. He looked into the mirror. Biggest. Emily stepped into the room, watching as he adjusted the cufflinks with practiced hands. You look like him again, she said softly. Who? The Ryan Hale that built an empire from a college dorm. The man who scared boardrooms and never blinked. Ryan glanced at his reflection, and for the first time in months, he recognized the man staring back. Let's go win something, he said. He took one step, then another. Not because he was fully healed, but because he refused to sit still ever again. The doors opened, and every head turned. There was no announcement, no assistant, no fanfare. Just the sharp, steady sound, tap, step, tap. Ryan Hale, on his feet, in full control. Eric dropped his pen. Megan blinked twice, then grabbed the edge of the table. One board member whispered, "Is that?" Another murmured, "He wasn't supposed to walk again." Ryan reached the head of the table and placed both palms flat on the polished oak. His voice was calm, clear. Before we begin, let's make one thing clear. I'm not just here. I'm back. No one moved. No one breathed. And in that stillness, the game changed. Ryan opened the folder, slowly. Here's a contract for the R&D division's lease in Palo Alto. Slide. A copy of a forged signature. This is the shell company Eric registered 3 months before the vote. Slide. Wire transfer logs. And this is a private server access log showing that confidential board materials were accessed and exported the night before last quarter's review. Silence. Ryan's voice was steel. I don't have to prove intent. I only have to prove betrayal. Eric stood up shaking. You don't understand. No, Eric, you don't. You were betting on a man in a wheelchair staying down. Bad bet. He turned to the board. The documents have been forwarded to outside counsel. The SEC has been notified. The shareholder vote scheduled for Friday is invalid on the basis of fraud. Megan tried to speak. Ryan cut her off. You used to think I was out of the game. He stared directly at her. Turns out I was just warming up. The boardroom was still, not a whisper, not a phone buzzed. The chairwoman cleared her throat. All in favor of the immediate removal of Eric Thorne, say aye. One by one, aye, aye, aye. 9 voices, 9 knives to the back of the man who thought he held the strings. Any opposed? Silence. Eric slumped into his chair. Megan stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight. Jason couldn't even look up. Ryan didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He just looked at them, like a man who had nothing to prove anymore. Let the minutes reflect, the chairwoman said. Mr. Thorne has been unanimously removed. The gavel struck once, and just like that, the empire was his again. Emily, watching from the corner of the room, felt her chest rise not with pride, but with closure. The kitchen smelled like garlic and burnt toast. Ryan was swearing softly at the stove. Emily sat on the counter reading an old novel with one leg tucked beneath her. "You called this risotto?" she teased. "I call it progress," he muttered, tasting it with a wooden spoon. There was music now, in the halls, on Sunday mornings. The echo in the house had been replaced by laughter, off-key singing, the sound of two people trying, not to be perfect, not to erase the past, but to build something new, with cracked hands and hopeful hearts. Ryan didn't walk to impress her anymore. He walked to bring her tea in the mornings. Emily didn't cry at night anymore. She cried once quietly while folding laundry because for the first time in years, she felt safe. The house was no longer a fortress. It was a home, not because of what was in it, but because of who stayed. It wasn't over candlelight. It wasn't on one knee. It was on the balcony, wind brushing their faces, a mug of tea in her hand, a worn hoodie on his shoulders. Ryan reached into his pocket. The box wasn't velvet. It was wooden. Simple. A single ring, no diamond. Just a band with the words, "I see you," carved inside. "This isn't a rescue," he said. "It's not a promise to fix you. I don't need saving. But with you," he looked at her, his voice almost breaking, "I remember who I am." Emily didn't cry. She just nodded once. And in that moment, the answer was yes. Not to a proposal, but to a life. Chosen, not scripted. Once Emily Carter was a bride-to-be with her life packed in a planner and a Pinterest board. Now she wasn't a bride. She was something better. A woman who had watched the man she loved walk away and chose not to chase him. A woman who stepped into a stranger's fortress and helped turn it into a home. She didn't get her old life back. She didn't want it. Because in losing everything, she found herself. And this time, she was the one holding the pen, not waiting for a fairy tale. Not waiting to be saved, just writing her own damn ending. Sometimes the greatest plot twist in your life is realizing you don't need to be saved. You just need to stop handing the pen to people who write you out of your own story. Emily's journey reminds us that heartbreak isn't the end. It's often the beginning of a better, braver chapter. Whether you've been betrayed, overlooked, or underestimated, remember this: you are not what they did to you. You are what you choose to become after. So don't wait for closure. Create your own conclusion. And make sure you're the one holding the pen. If this story moved you, if you saw a piece of yourself in Emily, or were reminded that healing is messy, real, and absolutely worth it, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we tell the ones that fight back. Stories of women who rise, who rewrite the ending, and take the pen back in their own hands. Hit that bell so you never miss one. Your story deserves to be seen too.